Okay, so before we start, just a show of hands. How many of you here have some sort of dietary need? Raise your hands. Okay, perfect. Now, how many of you know someone who has a dietary need? Quite a few of us. Now I want you all to think of a time where you were planning a lunch or dinner with friends, trying to decide where to eat. And after spending an hour, you finally find the perfect spot. But turns out one of your friends can't eat there. Why? It's because they have some sort of dietary need. And now you're back to square one. You don't want to leave them out, so you have to spend more time going through different websites to find a place where you all can eat at. Frustrating, isn't it? Now I want you to imagine what it's like to be that person who has a dietary need. Not only is it difficult for them to find a place to eat at, but on top of that, there's that feeling of guilt that because of your needs, it's causing inconvenience to others. So let me share you with what I have today, a little story about what it's like to be that friend, to give you an insider look of that struggle. Back when I was in middle school, I went on a field trip to a Chinese temple. We spent the morning learning about the history and culture of that temple, and then it was my favorite time of the day, lunchtime. Now our school told us that they would provide us with vegetarian options, which was perfect for me considering I had dietary needs myself. However, when I got my lunch, turns out that wasn't the case. Unlike what I was told, I got a plate full of noodles, but the noodles contained ham. So I told my teacher, I can't eat it because I practice a faith that prohibits the consumption of pork. And I expected that she'd understand. But instead she told me, take a spoon and just remove the pieces from the noodles. And I realized, despite there being a table full of food, my plate was actually empty. So I went back to my teacher and I told her that I can't eat those noodles. But she told me, stop being so fussy. Now, I don't know about you guys and most kids, but I've always been a very obedient one. So whenever an adult, like a teacher or my parents, would tell me to do something, I'd listen. And I did the same thing in this case. So despite feeling extremely uncomfortable, I took a spoon, removed the pieces of ham, and forced myself to eat the noodles. Now, fast forward a few years later, and I started uni. As a matter of fact, I studied right here at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And what we would usually have in our freshman year, which I'm sure a lot of you may know, is social gatherings. We'd go out for lunch, for dinner, in order to meet new people and make more friends. However, a lot of times, the students would prefer to eat at Hong Kong restaurants, which were more like street food. So for example, Thai Pai Dongs, where they would mainly serve meat dishes like pork, beef, chicken, and again, I couldn't eat there. And because of that, I missed out on many opportunities to meet new people, to make new friends, and be part of a community. So either I wouldn't go, or if I did, then I just sit there and awkwardly watch others eat. Not the kind of dinner one wants to attend. It was also during my years in uni that I realized I wasn't the only one dealing with these challenges. In my third year, I started my journey as a content creator, where I make videos showing restaurants across the city that cater to dietary needs. Initially, I thought my page wouldn't do well, because my options were limited. However, it turns out that wasn't the case. My page following was growing. I had people messaging me saying my page was actually helpful. And I realized that my page was more than just entertainment. It was a resource for the underserved communities. Seeing the success of the page, I expanded. And I started an online restaurant directory to make things a lot more easier and convenient. The platform offers a filtering system where people can find restaurants based on their dietary needs, cuisines, locations, and a lot more. The end goal is to make life easier for everyone, despite whatever dietary need they have. I'm Maryam Khan, and I'm on a mission to raise awareness and promote dietary inclusivity. I want to show the importance of it and how we can build a better community where everyone feels like they belong. So I've spoke about dietary inclusivity a lot, but what exactly is it? For those who may not know, dietary inclusivity refers to the practice of recognizing and accommodating different dietary preferences. It's also about understanding that there could be multiple reasons for it. One of them could be things like health reasons. And in health reasons, it'd be, for example, you would avoid certain food due to allergies, medical conditions, or just to have a healthier lifestyle. So for example, not sure how many of you would know, but there's a thing called having a celiac disease where you have to avoid gluten. And because of that, avoiding gluten is you end up missing out on a lot of different items to eat at. A lot of times bakery items would have gluten. And if those people did end up having it, it would cause them harm to their smaller intestines. And then we have things like a keto diet for weight loss purposes. In this case, you're cutting down on your carbs, so it means no pizza, no pasta, no fries, and you have to intake more healthier fats. And then moving on, we have religious and cultural practices. So for example, those who practice a religion called Jainism can only eat Jain food, and those who are Muslims can only eat halal food. And then lastly, we have dietary preference based on ethical views. So you would avoid animal products in the case for animal welfare or environmental impact. So now that we have an idea of the different reasons, we need to also know who exactly is being affected. So one big population and one big market are Muslims, with a population of over 2 billion people. That's 1 in every 4 people. And then next we have vegetarians, with India dominating the market. India has a population of over 1 million, and research conducted in 2020 showed that 38% were either vegetarians or vegans. That's approximately 400 people. That's greater than the whole population of the United States, 15 times more than Australia's, and 50 times more than Hong Kong's. Now that's a lot. Now moving on from the bigger groups, we have children. So a lot of times, children, they would have certain allergies, which because of that, they have to avoid things like, let's say, peanuts. And it's also important for teachers and schools to be aware of it, because by not doing so, it can cause things like medical emergencies or just having significant impact. And then next, on the opposite side, we have the elderlies. A lot of times as you're growing older, you end up developing a lot more restrictions, like for example, not being able to have milk, or you become lactose intolerant. Or in another case, you can become diabetic, so no more sugar. And that's something that's just part of life, but it's also something that we need to consider. And if you move away from people, we have businesses and organizations. So for example, restaurants, airlines, theme parks, and just offices. It's important that they cater to a larger audience in order to increase their reach, their revenue, and customer satisfaction. So dietary inclusivity is also above a social impact, but it's also about business. And lastly, everyone. Almost all of you in this room, and those who are watching it online, have someone they know that has a dietary need, or if not, they themselves have one. You only start to realize this when it starts impacting you. And then you figure out that dietary needs is more than just a me problem. It's a social challenge where everyone gets affected. So now that we understand there's this problem, right? But what's the solution? Well, one thing that we need to consider is what are the steps that we can take? And the first one is raising awareness. Not everyone is aware about what dietary needs are and what are their differences. So I'll give you a little story. A few years ago, I went on vacation to Cebu, an island in the Philippines. I was very excited to go island hopping, swimming with the whale sharks. Luckily, they don't bite. And then lastly, having different delicacies. And one practice I'd always have when visiting a new country is researching the different types of restaurants we can eat at. And usually this would do the trick. Or if not, then we'd ask the staff of the restaurant, do you offer any halal options? Now, usually it's fine, it works. But in this case, that didn't happen. I asked them, hey, do you offer anything that's halal? And they would reply with, what's halal? This was quite a shock to me. And I don't expect everyone or every country to know it, but whenever I visited a country in the Southeast Asia, they always offered it. If not, then they at least knew what it was. At the end of the day, this did impact my experience traveling there. And I realized it could have been a lot more better. So dietary needs also affects things like tourism. And for a country to be more inclusive, diverse, and international, we need to consider these things. So yes, there's a problem, but what is the solution, if any? Luckily for us, in comparison to 10 years ago, there has been a lot of improvement happening. One would be cafes, right? When you go to a cafe and you order a cappuccino, what's one thing that they ask? They'd ask you if you want oat milk or fresh milk or soy milk if they have it. And by doing so, they're actually catering to different communities. One of them are those who are lactose intolerant and can't have dairy products. And secondly, those who are vegan, who again can't have dairy products. And then next we have things like mock meat, which again is growing quite fast across the globe. Mock meat is basically a substitute for actual meat, which is supposed to taste like it. Now it depends where you eat. It may not always taste good, but the main point is that they offer it. And then next we have the growing trend and market of halal food. Halal food is growing quite exponentially, especially in Hong Kong, but also globally. In 2010, countries in Europe, like for example, Germany, had only 22 halal restaurants. However, now they have 20 times more. And it's not just Germany, it's across all the countries that they're having this impact and differences. So this shows that there is more awareness, and at the same time that it's being catered to. So that's one good thing that we see that's happening. So we know this is happening on a wider scale, but what can we as individuals do? So one thing is having an open conversation with people. We're human beings, we're social beings. So talking to people, asking them beforehand, do you have any sort of dietary need? Before booking a reservation at a restaurant. Show that consideration and then make them feel like they belong and that they're not some inconvenience. You can also go a step further and ask them why they have these needs. What exactly are the practices? Show curiosity. It makes a difference. Now, if you're a shy person, luckily for us, we have this thing called the internet. Use that. You can research about different needs, how exactly you can cater to it, and again, when you're trying to find restaurants, you can find it through there. For example, I've built a platform where we have filtering systems to find those restaurants, and I'm sure there's many like it across the globe. Use them. And then we have things like social media. Now, a lot of content creators or restaurants would post about themselves. You just need to be aware. And this, again, goes in every country. You'll find someone who makes relevant content that can be helpful to you guys. And then lastly, just doing some research beforehand. Going through the menu of a restaurant, which can usually be found on their website, social media page, or even just calling them and asking. And if they're nice, then they would maybe share it, but otherwise you'll have to find another way. And that usually does the trick. So lastly, as we wrap up, let's remember that dietary inclusivity is more than just a preference. It's about fostering a community where everyone feels like they belong. So let's remember next time, we ensure that everyone's plate is full, despite whatever dietary need they have. Thank you.